So I remember a while ago, over a decade ago, there was this weird website that popped up and got all the Fallout fans excited for the possibility of a new Fallout game. This time set in Boston, involving a group called The Institute. This was over a year before Fallout 4 was announced. The site was called The Survivor 2299, and it had people poring over clues, little bits of Morse code, audio log type things, waiting for a countdown, and excitedly, hurryingly justifying that this was totally real and absolutely not a hoax. The new Fallout was coming, and it was going to be Fallout 4 in Boston about the Institute. And wouldn't you know it, that's exactly what happened. The site effectively guessed the next Fallout. Now, mind you, in the fog of memory, it's hard to remember the order of events of this site appearing compared to what other rumors were already floating around. It's also challenged by the site not being around anymore. Well, kinda. We'll get there. For clarity, the website was intended as a hoax. It wasn't intended as some elaborate guess or fandom theory craft, wouldn't it be cool if the game was in Boston? What would that look like? Kind of thing. It was, from the outset, meant to trick people. And it worked. And coincidentally, it got some things right about the future game. So how did it do that? To spare you a more elaborate explanation, by playing it pretty safe. And look, I am not doing all this to lord over the past with my hindsight and be like, ha, you fools, of course Bethesda would pick Boston. I'm pointing out that the hoax took a safe bet with no real risk. If they did the same stuff but set the location in, I don't know, Philadelphia and were wrong, it was a hoax anyway. Being right about Boston wouldn't matter. Being right wasn't the goal. Toying with people and/or providing them an ARG experience was. My intent with this video is to think a bit about what this hoax was, what a hoax means to a community as an experience, and what good there is in remembering it. I stumbled on a video by Default Cheesecake while I was writing that talks about the context and greater details of the hoax itself. I am immensely thankful this video already exists because it has freed me from feeling like I have to explain a lot of smaller details of this whole thing just to keep them preserved somewhere, so to speak. Instead, I get to talk about what I found interesting in the whole thing. If you want the blow-by-blow, give that video a watch. He's got style and the story is genuinely wild. Though, to be fair, that video has like 800,000 views at time of recording, so you've possibly already seen it. Anyway, the hoax. Let's get events in order. First off, Fallout 3 came out in 2008, with the final DLC coming out in 2009. New Vegas was October 2010, the final DLC being Gunrunner's Arsenal in late September of 2011. It's important to set those up so we know everything Fallout that was out by the time the hoax started, and how these release dates might have contributed to the climate, shall we say? The hoax site was first up and discovered sometime around the 13th of November 2013, within a few hours of being up. It launches with a 25-day timer to something, and slowly expands and adds more detail, ranging from the Vault-Tec logo to increasingly elaborate ciphers. Even before it starts getting deeper, within days there are multi-paragraph posts squeezing and squinting at details to explain why it's definitely not a hoax. After letting this run for more than 2 weeks, Bethesda finally steps in with a tweet to deny involvement. Kinda passively, to be honest. Like, I know they have little reason to nip harmless excitement and speculation in the bud, but this was reaching levels that make GameStop apes look normal? It wasn't until years later, in June of 2015, that Bethesda finally said something actually about Fallout 4. Fallout 4 was announced and trailered on Facebook via a cryptic 24-hour timer please stand by message, dropping the 3rd of June, 2 weeks before E3 2015. And can I just say that doing a cryptic timer release thing a short time before a gaming event where trailers typically announce new games is basically the rough description of the hoax, so this probably gave some poor Redditor Vietnam tier flashbacks. Like, what a choice. The video for that announcement is a dead link now, but it served its purpose, I suppose, no reason to keep it around. The game was very complete looking, to the surprise of many, and in a further surprise would be out in less than half a year. It also took place in Boston. So while I've called Survivor 2299 a safe-ish bet, it did make a correct guess, and that had to come from somewhere, right? Maybe a leak? Unlikely. Even in 2012, well before the hoax, there were rumors of Bethesda location scouting in Boston, and thus Boston as the next location. Mind you, the original source of these rumors seems to be Bostonian Redditors saying, yeah, I have a friend/brother that works at MIT and he saw Bethesda people, which, like, at the time should maybe have been treated with more skepticism than it got, but it shook out to be true. Either way, it's a sign of how much people were hoping for a scrap of news, of movement. Oh, and pay no attention to the fact the original Reddit post is gone. On the note of the whole release dates thing, famously, New Vegas got shortchanged on dev time, so the short release window isn't too spectacular to note, but both it and Fallout 3 went from base game to full DLC in less than 2 years from launch, with consistent releases. I think that tight release window had some of the fans going feral by 2013, 2 years since any new Fallout content. I think that desperation had people turning off the skeptical parts of their brains. So, with that, we now have to ask ourselves a deceptive pair of questions. Why Boston? And how did the hoax get it right? We should probably reframe the question a little bit away from how did they get things right to why did they select Boston and the Institute as their core setting details for a hoax? What details did we have by 2013? Bethesda-era Fallout shook things up by placing Fallout 3 in a totally different setting within the Fallout world. Sure, side games had in the past left the West Coast, but Fallout 3 was mainline. It signaled a shift for the series, a sensible one if you think about who developed it. Interplay, Black Isle, Obsidian, their West Coast entities creating an imagined world they're familiar with. Bethesda opted to do the same. If you somehow didn't know this, Bethesda the game company is named after a nebulous blob region in Maryland, just outside of DC, where the original HQ was before they moved it slightly further away to Rockville, which is also in the DC metro area. The playable area of Fallout 3 would geographically include Bethesda's studio. And where I used to live. Here's what it looked like in my life and what it looked like in-game. So, from that, a conclusion to draw. Bethesda was relocating Fallout to the East Coast. This was further confirmed when New Vegas wasn't a numbered entry in the series. If we narrow location candidacy down to something with a somewhat similar vibe to DC in terms of size and the opportunity for aggressively American landmarks, if that's the new vision, then Boston makes sense. Oh, and I guess so does Philly. It was in the cards, and then location scouting rumors seem to further confirm it. But remember, we aren't looking for the truth here, we're looking for reasons to conclude Boston was a fit, so it doesn't matter if a rumor was unconfirmed, just that people were invested in it. The location scouting thing could have been unsubstantiated, and Bethesda always has multiple projects in the air at a given time, and locations aren't always literal. They scouted Washington DC for Oblivion, but the Imperial City didn't end up a tilted square with a bite taken out of it. Also, I say scouted, but again, this was home turf for Bethesda. They probably took public transit to get there. But enough about the scouting thing, let's turn to the in-game substantiations. This is a bit of a hindsight thing, but it's rather funny to me that New Vegas has some scraps that point towards DLC, like the base game loose threads of Elijah, Ulysses, and even to some extent Joshua Graham, and that Fallout 3 didn't take that approach. Taken as a whole, Fallout 3 DLC is far more disjointed from the base game. But with that said, Fallout 3 had what felt like a hook sitting right in front of us, had my friends speculating since the day after Operation Anchorage came out, double sure once the pit was a new physical location and traveled to, and then especially once Point Lookout happened with its operable boat. I mean, if you can take a boat to southern Maryland, maybe you can take one further afield. It felt like travel in the Fallout world, going beyond the capital wasteland, was possible. So of course, going to the Institute seemed on the table. And then Bethesda took the idea of new locations to the extreme, and the last location was literally outer space? Zimmer being from somewhere else that he traveled from, would go back to, all that, it made it feel possible. Philadelphia gets mentioned in the game, but we don't meet someone from there. Even if the location scouting rumors never broke, it was an organic conclusion to make with in-tech support from Fallout 3. The hook of the Commonwealth and Institute was the perfect thing to build a hoax around. And it doesn't take someone with Bethesda insider knowledge to know those basic facts about the game. Which I only bring up because some of the defense against hoax claims hinged on familiarity with Fallout lore proving it was Bethesda? Which is kinda a deranged thing to claim as evidence in front of a dedicated fan community willing to learn about ciphers to just get scraps of hype. I'd almost wager some of those people know Fallout lore better than Bethesda does. But, what if maybe Bethesda was behind it all? I remember right after it happened, I asked myself, did Bethesda do this? Like, akin to a false flag? Was this some subversive marketing campaign testing the waters of a Boston location? Unfortunately, Bethesda doesn't have the rules of declassification the CIA does, so if they did have a hand in the creation of the Hoax, and it was actually a subversive hype train generator or whatever, they aren't compelled to tell us. But to nip this in the bud, no. I highly, highly doubt Bethesda had a hand in it. In fact, this kind of hype 2 years prior to the game announcement itself that mostly left a bunch of people feeling burned and a little mad at Bethesda for not stepping in sooner might not have been good for them. Now, one claim in all this comes from a tweet saying they don't tend to address and deny rumors, butting heads with the Redditor speculation that they would and do butt in to deny rumors. That latter claim was deployed semi-often to convince people the ARG hype investigation was on the right track. Frankly, I don't remember Bethesda stepping in for any other hype rumor mills like this, but then again, there weren't really other hype rumor mills that came close to this. Ultimately, someone used the small rumors that already existed and pushed them into high gear, but it was also a somewhat predictable step. And isn't that easily more believable than it being some secret subversive marketing campaign years before launch that ended with a hee gotcha and disappointment? I remember the website also had some choice words for people who were mad about it. Let's look at those. Oh, this isn't correct. The site still exists, but not in any recognizable form. It's now a largely disused, self-anointed Fallout Universe fan site with articles that are sometimes just integrated ads and a habit of being trusted by online casino brand affiliates. Apparently at some point between then and now, the site was retooled to try and advertise or showcase a mod someone was making. And hey, on that note for a second, when, after the heartache hit the fandom, the Hoax maker did address the public. People wanted to know why. The reasons given for doing this split between 3 things. 1, bringing the community together, which mission accomplished, I guess? 2, forcing Bethesda's hand on news, which didn't happen and is a bizarre claim. And 3, something about a mod, writing a plot, 10 years to make a mod. Our window into the intent of the hoax is muddled by these claims, but I think the main reason is, and always was, to mess with people, to pull a hoax. They did it for the lulz. And then the site was retooled post-fact into that mod ambition in an attempt to channel the site traffic to something else, I suppose. Which leads us to now, and the site being what it is, and thus the experience, which could never be relived as it was, cannot be imagined easily from the source. What we have instead is scraps and bits and Redditor reactions to it. Memento mori and all that, I guess, but also, how funny. Another site of preservation, if you want to call it that, is the articles about the hype and rumors. Thankfully, some articles are still around, and even if they changed the hype headline to disappointment over a stupid rumor, have kept the body of the text largely intact. Suffice it to say, glimpses of the excitement are far easier to find than the thing itself. And that's interesting on another level. If we ask ourselves about the point of the term lost media, it's obviously that preservation matters, but given that we probably shouldn't preserve every single little thing, a cutoff point has to be established. The hoax, itself a trivial thing compared to the canon in the games and the broader gaming industry, might pass the line, might be worth preserving, but it barely is preserved. Instead, articles and Reddit posts fill in our understanding of it and give us a bit of a history of the moment that the hoax alone wouldn't actually give us. Deciding the worth of where the line on preservation is becomes difficult in this light. The best answer is to save it all, but given we live in a world of extreme link decay even on sites as attended as Wikipedia, I somehow doubt that's a real option. A funny thing for me personally is that I remember this incident more for the hysteria and subsequent rage than I do the fact they guessed right, and maybe it's from that framing that I don't instinctively leap to, but how did they know? It's immortalized in my head as a hoax, not a guess. And so that's the lens I want to emphasize. It didn't require a mole at the company to make a guess in line with current speculation, the guess didn't have to end up correct years later to have gotten the hype in the first place, and the fans were begging for news as it was, primed to shove disbelief to the side. I won't belabor this too long, but there's something to think about here when it comes to how these little unofficial moments become part of our experiences in life, things we associate with media they're connected to, but themselves not part of. It's not part of the story, not Bethesda official, and barely the kind of thing that gets, say, a wiki page. But it was part of the experience of Fallout 4 for a bunch of people. It likely haunts people to think, wow, that hoax got Boston right. From that, two things. One, it's just fascinating how these fan moments exist just outside the official story and were part of the excitement. Bethesda couldn't have intended this, couldn't have made that experience happen, but it's part of Fallout 4 memories for some people. But more seriously, two, it's a sign of how impermanent things can be on this supposedly permanent internet. Case in point, the erasure of the original I Saw Them in Boston Reddit post about location scouting linked to by articles that mention it. The articles preserve a summary and reaction to the post, what the point of the post was, and maintain a link to it. But the post itself only says deleted. All we have now is a secondary source we just have to trust with hindsight, or archived webpage snapshots for as long as those exist. Or sometimes the impermanence is even smaller things that one can still navigate around, like the tweet where Bethesda denied the rumors is from @BethBlog, which is now @Bethesda. Old screenshots exist from before the change, before Bethesda abandoned its blog and simplified its branding. BethBlog is gone, and that's its own entire tangential mass of dead links. If you didn't know that the BethBlog Twitter got renamed rather than deleted, you might not know where to look for the tweet, and given that Twitter's search function has become worse somehow, I don't even imagine that the tweet is easy to find on platform, even if you do know what you're looking for. And look, I know the internet is impermanent actually, stories are a dime a dozen these days, but I do think it bears repeat because it's still true. I could not have found the old versions of the site without archive.today, which is a similar tool to the Wayback Machine, and while presently stable, it is to my and public knowledge run by one guy. That's fragile. If we consider these things infrastructural in some way, then maybe we need a stronger lifeline than one guy or being one court case away from obliteration. Fallout 4 did eventually come out and was set in Boston. The hoax was validated in that, but it wasn't ever meant to, and with time, we've come to ask the wrong questions, all while the history of this dumb little moment decays. Hi. This is a short video by my standards, but I wanted to get something sorta simple done after the big inscription one, which was a challenge. It wasn't too huge to make, so it wasn't, hopefully, too huge a detour from whatever I'm doing next. I wish I could settle on something. Thank you to everyone who helps finance my dumb decision to be a niche internet micro-celebrity. This time, in particular, we have John Ursaw, Cesare Mikua, Daniel Indicator, Defender, Franz Johannes Foilner, Galactic Beyond, Gilded Dragon, Hornlit, Isaac of Lyria, Lysing Afame, Mark Soto, Mihrab, Michael Kelly, Nick, Nitopir, Neko Sniffer, Potato Mancer, Queen Naked Mole Rat, Riley Long, Sippa Turnipsy, Third Xeno, and Vichire. Short one this time, longer one next time. Not much more to say. Bye.